Welcome to the Crucible podcast. My name is Caitlin and today I'm going to talk about Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible. I'm going to talk about how this text and a related text that I have chosen, which is the novel called Animal Farm by George Orwell, represents human qualities and emotions through human experiences in text. Arthur Miller uses his characters in The Crucible to create representations of political figures, and he illustrates the manipulation and fear that McCarthy spread through the allegorical character of Abigail Williams. When Miller and Orwell both first went to publish their texts, they both were rejected as both were very controversial stories with great meaning behind them that challenge what society believes at the time. Miller was living through an era of McCarthyism where people were accusing each other of being communists. He wrote The Crucible to reflect the mass cultural and political hysteria produced when the US government tried to suppress communism. The Crucible served as an allegory for Miller to criticize McCarthyism. It uses historical events as a metaphor for contemporary issues. Americans at the time became fearful that their friends or neighbours might be communists and be attempting to undermine America. While Arthur Miller was researching the Salem witch trials, he saw that there were similarities between the fear and hysteria of the witch trials and the scare of impending communism. He wrote The Crucible to show the dangers of the persecution of innocent people and mass hysteria. This allegory allowed Miller to explore the themes of power, fear, and human behaviour that are still relevant today. The play sort of served as a lesson to people that trying to preserve your reputation can end up harming others. Miller talks about the allegory of communism on page 39 of Act 1, where he says, "The analogy, however, seems to falter when one considers that, while there were no witches then, there are communists and capitalists now, and in each camp there is a certain proof that spies of each side are working and undermining each other." Miller is saying that while witches were made up, communists are very real, and they were a major issue at that point in time because the human quality of deceit was largely in play. A similarity between The Crucible and Animal Farm is that they are both allegories. Orwell wrote Animal Farm during 1945 and allegorizes the Russian Revolution. Each character in the novel represents a political figure from the revolution. Napoleon is a representation of Joseph Stalin, and Snowball represents Leon Trotsky. Both Stalin and Napoleon were initially passionate about the revolution, and they were eventually manipulated into supporting a cause that was exactly what they were fighting against. The reason behind Orwell writing Animal Farm was because he observed the atrocities of both Stalinism and Nazism. He wrote the novel as a criticism of both and as a warning against totalitarianism. Orwell brought up an allegory in the book early on and showed human qualities in the book when Old Major said, "Man is the only creature that consumes without producing." Then he tells his fellow animals that despite this, man rules over us all. This foreshadows that the pigs will come to rule over the other animals if they do not produce anything except for meat, while other animals produce eggs and milk, for example, and the pigs are effectively like men. Throughout the play The Crucible, Miller portrays how the officials of Salem refuse to recognize that their court is corrupt. The governor, Danforth, and Judge Hathorne both reject any criticism of their ruling, and they believe that anyone who challenges their authority is conspiring with the devil and plotting to overthrow the court. Despite the adequate evidence that the court is corrupt, Danforth uses the opportunity to achieve his personal goals. Human qualities that are shown in The Crucible are reputation, self-preservation, and fear. This is shown on page 112 and 113 in Act 4, where Paris is scared of the dagger threat he is getting at his doorstep, and he asks Danforth to postpone the hangings out of fear, and he also wants to salvage the reputation of the court and church as he believes that there is discontent in the community over the hangings. Danforth responds saying, "Now hear me and beguile yourselves no more. I will not receive a single plea for pardon or postponement. Them that will not confess will hang. 12 are already executed. The names of these 7 are already given out, and the village expects to see them die this morning." Danforth cares more about the reputation of the court than the possibility of the innocence of the accused victims. He believes that the postponement speaks of philandering on his part. There is also the human qualities of transgression and redemption that are shown with the character Hale on page 113 of Act 4. When he enters, the narration in the book says, "Reverend Hale enters. They look at him for an instant in silence. He is steeped in sorrow, exhausted and more direct than he ever was." This shows that Hale has more of a change of heart than what he initially believed when he was condemning innocent people to die, and he also feels sorrow for it. He later tries to redeem himself by convincing the accused victims to confess to witchcraft, in order to save their lives, even if it may not be true. Some human qualities that are seen throughout Animal Farm are mainly greed and pride. Through communism, the farm was supposed to be an equal environment for all the animals, but the pigs started showing human qualities such as greed and pride. This caused Snowball to leave Napoleon because of how greedy he had become, and because of this, Napoleon uses manipulation and fear to trick the other animals that Snowball keeps visiting the farm and is the reasoning behind all their problems. Napoleon makes up that Snowball was Jones's secret agent, who was the old farmer that they overthrew. Because of this, the animals start to distrust each other, and Napoleon forces animals to confess to crimes through peer pressure and fear, and this results in lots of bloody executions and death. This is shown on page 62, and this text states, "They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Jones's secret agent for years past. When they had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice, Napoleon demanded whether any other animal had anything to confess." The themes of confessions are seen throughout both the Crucible and Animal Farm, and they are used to spark fear as a human emotion. Both the Crucible and Animal Farm have representations of people in politics and allow readers to explore political power as a human experience. This power is often used to manipulate and gain influence over others. Throughout Animal Farm, George Orwell condemns the misuse of power by depicting how Napoleon dictatorship rules the farm. The sacrifice for the greater good is a common excuse for corruption. Throughout Animal Farm, this is shown when Napoleon makes up excuses that sacrificing the farm's food supply for the pigs is necessary, because they are the ones that need it. And he makes up excuses that he does not really want it, but will have it to help everyone else. This manipulation is what leads to the other animals on the farm to starve, work long hours, and suppress their individual freedoms, while the pigs thrive. The animals suffer because of these tyrannical decisions, and some animals lose their lives through these violent purges. This is seen on page 25, where Squealer defends the pigs taking the milk. He says, "You do not imagine that I hope we pigs are doing this in the spirit of selfishness and privilege." Squealer twisted the truth and made it out that the pigs were heroes and helping the other animals, and he purposely acted offended to draw away any attention from the pigs. The animals on the farm had blind faith to the pigs, the same way that the officials in the court in the Crucible easily believed Abigail Williams and the other girls. To conclude this episode of the Crucible podcast, where I went for a close analysis of The Crucible by Arthur Miller and Animal Farm by George Orwell, I'm going to thank our sponsors, Cedars Christian College, and I hope to see you all next time for the next episode, where I'll discuss why I hate podcasts.